So we haven't done any research in a while, so let's go in and find the best dividend stocks right now so we can get in just before the end of financial year. So what do we look for when we're looking for a good dividend stock? Now, this is what I look for. The first thing, obviously, is that it pays good dividends. Now, for me, that's a dividend yield of over 5%. Sometimes I'll go a bit lower, but generally that's what I'm looking for because I want a really good return on that money, on that investment. The second thing, obviously, is we want those dividends to be consistent. There's no use getting one high dividend and then it just doesn't pay well for the rest of the time. We want them to be consistently paying those good, high, beautiful dividends. And of course, we don't want to get stuck in a dividend trap, so we also want to make sure that the price is going up over the long term. Now, price is less of a concern for me, but I still want a stock or a company that is increasing and growing over the long term. That way, I can be more confident that if the company is growing, then my dividend should be growing as well over the long term. I like that consistency. So let's go and start by grabbing the top 200 companies. Usually, I like to stick to the top ASX 200, mostly because they're more established companies and it's just easier to do research on 200 companies rather than 1,000 companies. Work smarter, not harder. Plus, most of the bigger companies within Australia do pay pretty good dividends anyway, so it's not that hard to find some good companies within that ASX 200. So I haven't done any research myself for a while, so this is going to be exciting and new for me as well, and we'll go through it together and see what we come up with. Let's go. Just so we can narrow down our selection really quickly, I'm going to grab the ASX 200, 5% dividend yield or higher. I'm just going to put the dividend growth rate in here just to narrow it down really quickly. So I'm just looking for something positive here so the dividends are growing over the long term. That one's not completely necessary, but I thought we'd just narrow it down to only those that have really positive growth. So we've got 27 results here from the criteria. I'm just going to put them into a spreadsheet now so we can narrow it down further. And I don't need most of the columns. I just want the dividend yield and the 5-year growth because that's really all I'm interested in right now. We can add in the 5-year return price to make sure that that's positive and that's going up over the long term. So now I'm just going to go in and check on Google what the 5-year increase in price has been just to make sure that it's positive. Let me just go fill that in and we'll have a look at what results we get. Okay, so that's all filled in. I'm just going to sort the range and take out the companies that didn't increase over the last 5 years in price. Now we're left with 16 companies. That's still quite a lot. All of these are quite good companies, but I'm going to narrow that down because that's still quite a lot to work with and look at which ones have been the most consistent with their dividend payouts because that's what I'm mostly looking for when I'm looking for dividend paying stocks is consistency. So I'm going to go and have a look at all of the 16 here and pick out my top 5. This is just a visual representation of all the dividends that have been paid for each company. To have the most consistent is usually a beautiful graph where the dividends are increasing over time. So these are the ones visually that look the best in terms of the dividend growth and consistency. So I'm going to pick my top 5 out of this list of 8, although some of them haven't been increasing as well over the last 1 year and 5 years. So I'm going to discount a few, and that way I'm going to stick with just what I think is the best in terms of growth of dividends, but also growth in terms of price. So I'm going to pick ANZ, ALD, Ampol, NWH, which is NRW Holdings, MTS, which is Metcash, and then CNU, which is Chorus, which is a New Zealand company. So let's go and have a look at those in a little bit more detail. So here's ANZ. As a dividend investor, I really like the banks to have in my portfolio. They're usually very consistent in paying dividends, except when there's a pandemic, of course, but generally they're very good at being consistent, high payers for dividends. Next is Ampol. They have dipped a little bit in price over the last 6 months or so, but generally they're increasing in price over the long term and the dividends are also increasing. This is one probably not that I would hold forever, but right now it looks really good. Next we have NWH, which is a construction and mining company. Again, those dividends look great. 2024 is slightly lower than the other years, so I'd keep an eye on that. But overall, the price growth and the dividend growth seems really good. Metcash owns a lot of stores like IGA, Mitre 10, and a bunch of others. The price growth has been pretty stagnant over the last few years, but the dividends have been nice and stable and growing. And lastly is Chorus, which is a New Zealand company. It's in telecommunications. Now, because it's a New Zealand company, it won't have any franking, but the dividend is nice and there seems to be a lot of growth. So I like it for that reason. So those are the 5 that I like right now based on the research I just did last week. That changes all the time, although not as much as you would think, but they all seem to have good growth and consistent growing dividends. But of course, make sure you do your own research before investing in anything. Until next time, take care, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!